where did this story go? And what really happened here? This is a huge story. How did this story die? And if it did die, who buried it?
These lovely girls, and you had the finest of them, greet you, and that's to show you how we feel about you and the kind of a good time that's ahead of you, starting tonight.
If they had any idea of the ramifications and the ripple effect that had on her, it changed her life, my grandmother's life, mine. I have no idea where her life would have gone had it not been for that night.
You don't believe in taking no for an answer, do you? Don't look at me like that, Mr. Powell. You scare me.
She's a tramp. There were the whole vocabulary of bad woman, slut, tart, tramp, everything came up immediately if anybody mentioned she was raped.
First of all, I was stunned. I have read a lot about legal cases over the years. I had never heard of her, and I was actually quite scandalized that, number one, this had happened to her, and number two is that why wasn't anybody talking about it? Why are we sweeping this under the carpet?
I was on deadline for my second book, and I was at the part where Jean Harlow's dying. It was the first week of June, 1937.
Look at that drive, all of 200 yards.
And it's a huge story. 26-year-old at home, dying, nobody knows why, nobody knows how.
Meanwhile, the King of England is abdicating his throne to marry an American divorcee. So here we have two historic stories, and suddenly something's pushing both of them off the front pages. An underage dancer named Patricia Douglas goes public with shocking charges against MGM, accusing them
of rape. That she had been raped at an MGM sales convention party, that she had been lured into under false pretenses. Now, I kind of pride myself of having heard about everything pertaining to MGM because that's my job. I'm writing a book about Jean Harlow. I ought to know everything that's going on at MGM. I've never heard of Patricia Douglas, never heard her name mentioned, never seen her name in any of the reference sources, any.
The editor of my book was Jackie Onassis.
We went out to lunch and she said, "Is there anything you're interested in doing?" And I said, "There's a story that I came across when I was doing the Harlow book, and this is what it is."
And I told her about all these headlines I'd found. Wild party hosted by MGM for its salesmen. Patricia Douglas charges one of them, David Ross, with rape, then takes her case all the way up to federal court. That didn't compute. And why has this never appeared anywhere since 1937?
Am I crazy? Or is this a huge story that no one's ever told? And Jackie said, "Well, if anyone can find what happened to her, David, it's you." And when you're given that kind of mandate from that kind of person, how do you walk away from it?
At the time the Patricia Douglas story went public, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer was home to Hollywood's biggest stars.
Ladies and gentlemen, here comes the thrill of the evening.
Mr. Clark Gable. Thank you. Oh, and what a lovely, lovely, beautiful creature for Jean Harlow.
Thank you.
Our banks, of course, is Joan Crawford, as you all know.
Thank you, Congressman.
Everyone probably guessed from the cheering that it's Miss Norma Sheridan.
I want to congratulate everybody in it. I think they're all marvelous.
Now, friends, the excitement breaks all bounds. The enthusiastic spectators dash forward to greet and acclaim their favorite stars.
MGM had its own police force, grade school, private railroad, and acting academy.
Oh, wait a minute. In the first place, the kiss is awful. You know perfectly well not to bump noses.
Presiding over it all was the most powerful man in Hollywood and the highest paid man in America.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Louis B. Mayer.
It was like the Wizard of Oz. You know, it's no wonder they made the movie, because Louis B. Mayer was the Wizard of Oz. He made everything work.
Our fans are entitled to the best. I'm thankful that we can supply what we consider fine pictures.
Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. Oh, what a liar.
So here we are at the Ambassador Hotel at the very spot where the 282 MGM conventioneers arrived in 1937.
In the middle of the Great Depression, MGM had just posted record profits, thanks to its sales force who sold the studio's movies to theaters across the U.S.
Now these salesmen are getting to participate in the fantasy factory, and they're being welcomed into this world. They're being picked up at the train station in a private rail car, and then taken by motorcade to the Ambassador Hotel, rented out in its entirety for them.
Then they're being escorted by motorcycle police to MGM, the greatest film studio in the world.
And they're being told, we're the greatest film studio, and you're the greatest film sales force. So they're like part of the royal family, and that's intentional. That's what MGM wants them to think. But what it feeds into is this idea that we're above the law. We can do what we want. In 1937, if you said to someone, I'm going on a convention, what it's basically saying is, I get to go wild. I get to leave my home community, leave the social constrictions in that home community, and I get to have fun sponsored by my employer.
Have a nice trip out.
Well, the boys had a good time. In fact, they ran out of scotch last night, so...
And that's the setting for this convention, because Louis B. Mayer says to them, thank you.
And that's to show you how we feel about you and the kind of a good time that's ahead of you, starting tonight at the famous Coconut Grove.
I'm going to treat you like kings. I'm going to wine you and dine you and make you feel as important as you are to this studio. Welcome to California. Anything you want.
Anything you want.
At 16, I went to work for MGM, and I considered it was a windfall. There was an air, a constant air of being pursued. All the men tended to try to break women down. These were very aggressive men. Twice, I was asked to go to be interviewed, and the guy got up and said, well, let's see your legs.
Now, raise them up a little. Oh, don't mind me. I just want to see if you're the right type.
And you'd pull up your skirt, and you'd say, turn around, honey. Pull it up higher.
Bring them up a little higher. Up.
And then he'd say, well, let's see how you feel. And then he'd walk around the desk and grab you.
You know, I kind of like you myself.
You couldn't go to the Citizen News and say, you know, Mr. So-and-so did this to me at MGM. No way, because the studios owned Hollywood. I mean, this is no exaggeration. It was one of the laws I learned very early on. Even the adults were afraid. Everybody seemed to be afraid of something, except the men that were pursuing girls, you know. That was the one thing that nobody seemed to have any compunction about.
Eddie Mannix, Louis B. Mayer. There's something going on there.
Where we are now is the Hal Roach Ranch.
So where we're walking on now was a 10-acre ranch. I mean, this pleasant, sweet row of houses, suburbia.
Except it didn't look anything like this.
MGM producer Hal Roach owned the ranch where the convention party took place. I asked Richard Bann, a Hal Roach historian, to show me around the scene of the crime. If you were working here, if you were Laurel and Hardy or our gang, because this is where Hal Roach made all their movies.
No phones, no public transportation. I mean, if you're here because you've been taken here.
Right.
And this is where she claimed she was raped, in this field where he dragged her to a parked car and raped her, and she was talking about the freshly tilled soil in her account of the event. So it would have been
the party would have been up at the top of the hill. The big barn would have been where the...
That's where the party, they said it was held in a barn. So they would have parked their cars here, gone up to the party, which was held in the barn. The girls, these dancers that they brought in for a movie call, they would have been up there waiting in the barn for something to happen.
And they did film here all the time.
So if you got a call saying you were shooting at the Roach Ranch, that was completely legitimate.
Go home! Go home! Did you hear me? I said go home.
I mean, according to the newspaper articles, the Dandridge sisters were there as entertainment.
Dorothy Dandridge, only 13 years old at the time.
Laurel and Hardy were there as entertainment. This was a big event.
500 cases of scotch and champagne for 282 men. No wonder the newspapers called it a drunken orgy.
Yes, it is disillusioning.
I remember two words that I learned. One of them was rape, which was an extreme disaster. And the other one that usually was in the same conversation was tart. Well, she's a tart. What do you expect? She's a tramp. The whole vocabulary of bad woman, slut, tart, tramp, everything came up immediately if anybody mentioned she was raped.
I've been watching all these movies from Patricia Douglas's day, and rape absolutely does not exist. Either she passes out just in time, or he passes out just in time. Or there's a handy weapon nearby for that just in the nick of time escape. You would think rape would be no laughing matter, but the place you see it most is cartoons. Some creep's always after poor Betty Boop.
Can't you see the love light in my eyes? Huh? I have you in the hand. Let go.
Let me alone, you big brute, you.
Drop that girl. Okay.
Wise guy.
The story of Temple Drake is this huge exception. Based on the novel Sanctuary by William Faulkner and released in 1933, the story of Temple Drake is about a spoiled Southern belle who really gets raped. And even though she goes public in court, Temple Drake's carried off to a happy ending.
Be proud of her, Judge. I am.
The story of Temple Drake is an intense movie, which is why so few people got to see it. Even though the rape scene was painstakingly storyboarded in advance, the film was banned and barely seen. Even today, 7 decades later, it's unavailable on TV, VHS, or DVD.
MGM was meticulous about purging its files, but some stuff ended up at the University of Southern California. So I called Ned Comstock in Special Collections, and in deep storage, he found a Patricia Douglas file. Has anybody ever looked at this file?
Not this particular file that I know of.
All right, what do we got here? This is the call sheet for 120 girls. May 5th, 1937, 4 p.m. was the call time. Where to report the ranch. It's just like it's a movie call. There she is, girl 27, Patricia Douglas. And this, they've typed it up, and she's still girl 27, but it's in caps, underlined, Pat Douglas. This is from Western Costume, which was right next door to Paramount, and where you'd go to be costumed for a film. Pat Douglas, one brown felt large cowboy hat, one suedette skirt, one pair of black side-seam boots. So
they're dressing these dancers like Betty Boop.
To be like hostesses at this for the conventioneers.
Evidently, but they didn't know it. They would have thought they were in some sort of Western musical, yeah. These girls would get called by the casting directors and go from studio to studio to studio, whatever the call was. Yeah. And I don't think they paid a whole lot of attention to what they were doing. They did their musical number and they were done.
Right.
This is a list of the people who worked the party. LA Police, State Police, Culver City Police, and our own police and watchmen. So you have policemen from 4 different departments. You have the Los Angeles City Police, the California State Police, the Culver City Police, and the MGM Internal Studio Police, and nobody ever files a report that this girl has been raped. So this is a questionnaire. This is probably what they gave to the 119 other girls. What is your name? What is your age? Do you know Patricia Douglas? When did you first meet her? State in detail what you know about Patricia Douglas's past reputation for morality. Have you ever seen Patricia Douglas intoxicated before or after the party? They need these people to toe the party line. They need them to say that she was a tramp and she was a drunk, and therefore she couldn't possibly have been raped, because tramps can't get raped in terms of the 1937 mindset.
This is the Pinkerton Detective Agency report. The same day Patricia Douglas goes public,
Their surveillance of her, they're watching her, they're asking people questions about her, they're standing outside her house all day, they're seeing who's going in, who's going out, where she's going. Say Patricia Douglas is a drinker, her character is questionable. I mean, this is character assassination. Little piece of paper from the desk of Hal Roach. Dr. B. Dakin treated Douglas for GU. GU is genital urinary, and that was a discrete term at the time for BD, specifically gonorrhea.
Hal Roach owned the ranch where the party took place. Now he wants this doctor to say Patricia Douglas had VD.
Because if Patricia Douglas had VD, she was sexually active, and if she was sexually active, she was a slut. Nowhere in this file does it say she wasn't raped. There's nothing here where they're saying that her contention isn't true. What's here is we have to make her look immoral, because if she is immoral, she is not rapeable.
Have you been able to find her?
You have to believe she came to a bad end. From what we've just seen, MGM went all out to destroy her.
I do believe her. I absolutely believe her. I think you've got an assault and battery. That's a classic assault and battery case.
I have read a lot about legal cases over the years. I'd never heard of Patricia Douglas, so I did a little research. In fact, I even employed some of the Fox News Channel research capabilities and could find nothing about her. She had been completely hidden. She was off the legal radar screen.
Michael Tatelman's law firm handles high-profile Hollywood cases, and Greta Van Susteren analyzes them for the Fox News Channel. I gave them both the Patricia Douglas court files, which haven't been seen since 1937.
As a lawyer advising someone about whether to bring a case like that, you tell your client what to expect. I would hope that her lawyer told her it would be very difficult, you've got to have a lot of courage, you're going to be raked over the coals, you're going to be portrayed as someone you're not, and do you still want to do it? And I think the mere fact that she went forward, especially in that day and age, says a lot about her character.
What's fascinating about this woman is that she was bringing a federal lawsuit, a civil rights claim, perhaps the first one, for a group of women who were tricked into attending a party and tricked into being put in a very dangerous situation, and then she was raped.
The people were sued. David Ross was never served. Again, I find that hard to believe. To serve a guy who is working for MGM, and presumably working at MGM in Illinois, should not be too hard. I mean, there are process servers all over the country. You send the papers to the process server and you tell the process server to find the guy.
I mean, in my wildest dreams, the idea that the DA would not have disqualified himself in light of the fact that he was getting substantial contributions from MGM to his political campaign. Today, we'd be in his front yard. Every time he walked out, we'd stick a microphone in his face and say, how in the world can you possibly give this woman a fair shake when you've got MGM stuff and cash in your pocket for your election?
Would I have taken the case then? You know, who knows? There's a lot that I imagine people would think about in deciding to go up against the Goliath, MGM.
A crime was committed against her, and then what happens? Everybody runs. No one will help her. The law won't help her. The DA won't help her. MGM won't help her. The doctor who examined her wouldn't help her. What I find disturbing, I can think of no reason, none, zero, even though I'm a criminal defense attorney, no reason at all to publish her name, her picture, her address, and refer to MGM Studio, who is financing this 5-day extravaganza, this drunken brawl for its salespeople, refer to them as a local studio. If that doesn't tell you right from the get-go the sort of community sentiment about these cases back in the late 30s, I don't know what does.
MGM had one of its employees accused of raping this woman, and the others accused of participating in the scheme to bring these people to this place. So, of course, MGM had a huge interest in having this case go away.
So I discovered the Patricia Douglas case inspired another girl to come forward,
who also said she had been raped. Her name was Eloise Spann, and she was a contract player at MGM.
She was a singer, 19 years old, came forward and accused an MGM executive of raping her.
She became pregnant, she had to have an abortion, she had been a virgin. She went to the same lawyer that represented Patricia Douglas, and then saw everything unfold exactly as it had for Patricia Douglas.
According to the court records, this house is where Eloise Spann was raped.
Mom never talked about this. This is what's so amazing to me. When you called, I had mixed feelings. Excuse me. Well, because this is not a nice story. And this is someone that you love.
Jack Terry is the son of Eloise Spann. When I found him, he knew nothing about her case.
$5 million suit filed by girl charging assault.
Very proud of what she did. And I don't know if she thought she could win or not, but that doesn't make a hill of beans. She went after him.
And this, at the time, would have been the ultimate humiliation. A few weeks after the attack, Ms. Spann testified it was necessary for her to undergo an operation to avoid becoming a mother.
My mother never felt well. And I don't know if it's from the abortion that she had through this gentleman, because I'd come home from school, I'd get off the bus, and Mom would be on the couch, or Mom would be in bed. A lot of our dinners were scrambled eggs and toast.
When I first called you, you said my mother died of a respiratory problem, and I had had her death certificate, and I didn't want to say anything because...
She killed herself.
This is the coroner's report.
She hung herself.
And your father was trying to get the door open.
I didn't get into it. You lose your mother, and you only want to know so much, and then you don't want to know anymore. My wife and I are religious people, and we just hope when they go before the big guy that they have to pay the price for this nonsense. Because what they've done is they've ruined, harmed, killed too many people. She never would sing. I will hear her voice for the first time soon, today. And I'm really anxious.
Jack's watching an old movie of his mother singing. I wish everyone else could watch it too, but when they heard about this project, the studio which owns all her films refused to release any footage of Eloise Spann. Knowing about Eloise Spann's suicide, I was sure Patricia Douglas had met an equally tragic fate.
Women who were the epicenter of a Hollywood scandal didn't live to a ripe old age. Otherwise, we would have heard from her. Someone would have found her, or she would have found someone and said, "This is my story. I need to tell this story."
So the idea that she would be a woman in her mid-80s that was still alive and just sitting there waiting...
It never entered my mind.
I was furious when I heard from David. Imagine 65 years, nobody knowing what happened to you when you were young. And here comes some young fella out of the blue and wants to talk to me about the case. So I didn't care about the story being told. I kept it a secret 65 years. Why not go die with it? Who would care? My family always called me baby. I guess because I was the baby of the family.
For the first few months, she hung up on me.
You're bringing back memories. Yeah, I don't like them. Do you understand that?
We need it on record, is why we're discussing it now.
Talk is cheap.
She won't meet or mention MGM's wild party, but with her permission, I'm taping our calls. Because even though she doesn't seem to know it, this little old lady is the key player in both MGM's most shocking scandal and the biggest cover-up in Hollywood history.
Want Patricia Douglas on the show? I would kill to have Patricia Douglas on my show. I would kill to find out what her experience was. Not the rape, not the sordid, ugly details, but the system, the corruption.
I believe my mother was married 8 times. She was a gown designer. She designed gowns for actresses, and she had her own shop. She worked with the studios. She was a tiny woman, but when she put on heels, she was the right height. And she had a walk with so much poise that clothes were made for her. And she was such a joy to watch. I loved to walk behind her because everybody would walk past and not look at her. And the minute she passed, all the heads would turn to look at her. I never gave myself a thought. Just pride in her. And then she kind of disappeared.
All she had was a mother. The father was long gone out of her life, and she never had siblings.
Never, ever was I nurtured. I think my mother was the type that wanted the child, and once you had him and the cuteness wore off, then it was like a toy you'd get tired of. I used to go to the movies for having people around me, because in my family I was such a loner, I was ignored. I was just there. So at least in a movie, Even though I didn't like the picture, there were people around me, and I felt loved.
So, did you have close friends?
No. I do not make friends easily. I don't expose myself, I give him a chance to hurt me. Nobody gets that chance, because I don't get that close to him. You want the truth?
Yeah, I want the truth.
I don't feel anything. I'm not impressed by what we're doing.
Have you ever been in love?
No, I have never been in love, and I have never known what it is to love somebody.
And do you think that was taken away from you by what happened at the MGM party?
Oh, I think that was taken away from me because I believe no matter how much I feel towards a man, I still don't trust. Doing extra work in the movies was not a thrill for me. It meant nothing. I was quite popular with dance directors because I was a very quick learner. Once I would learn the step, I could help teach the other dancers.
And how old were you when you started doing that?
I'd say around 14, 15.
These are underage girls. They were not 21. Under the law, they're kids.
And a lot of young girls were chorus girls and dancers, and the dancers were fair game. There were more young women brought in during the musical period who were really, really vulnerable.
These girls, and that's what most of them were, underage girls, would work half naked among all-male crews. And in those days, a girl who had rhythm, who knew how to move her body, was considered sexually aware, and thus sexually available.
And you're always kind of being pursued on the set. That's why I hated the set, because you were so vulnerable, and there were a lot of obscenities. And they were fair game. It was just open season all the time.
As far as sex was concerned, that was never explained to me. We never talked about sex. It was never brought up. It was never, ever brought up. My mother was too busy, I guess, getting married. She seemed to be very adept at it.
That's it. Get him up, get him up, get him up, get him up. Good. Rest. Fine. That's fine. That's fine.
All the girls who worked as dancers in Hollywood, all they did was work in these numbers, these extravaganzas that were full of fantasy and music and dance and hence romance. The idea that everything was about romance is a wonderful romantic notion, but what happens when someone eyes you and romance isn't on his mind? Your mother hasn't told you a thing. All she's told you is dance, find romance, if he proposes, say yes. But what if he propositions? What if he doesn't propose and there's a big difference? Or what if he doesn't even proposition? What if he just takes you and grabs you and drags you out to a car? And that happens. And that's what this story is about. This is the story of someone that happened to.
I never thought of being an actress or being a star.
And did you like to dance?
Yeah, I like to dance. I love to dance.
We have these 3 or 4 hour phone conversations, and her TV's always on in the background. And I asked her once, "What are you watching?" And she said, "MTV. I love to see these kids dance." And I said, "What kind of a dancer were you?" And without missing a beat, she said, "I moved just like J-Lo." She moved just like J-Lo, but after 1937, Patricia Douglas never danced again.
I was shocked by the hypocrisy of stars that everybody believed in. Example, Loretta Young, when she had the baby by Clark Gable, said she adopted it. As the baby matured and got older, it was a smitten image of her. There's no way she could deny it. And she denied it till her deathbed to that poor girl that she wasn't her mother.
Loretta Young gets pregnant by Clark Gable. He's married, she's a staunch Catholic, so when rumors start flying, she stages a press conference in her bedroom. Even though she's 8 months pregnant, she swears it's just a stomach ailment. And when a baby girl's born, she deposits it in an orphanage, waits 18 months, then announces she's adopting a little girl. Her little girl, which everyone in Hollywood knew, but no one dared to say aloud. I couldn't understand why Patricia fixated on this story until I went through the newspapers from 1937. And while she's on all the front pages, buried inside is Loretta Young's adoption announcement. So while a rape victim's crucified in the press, a movie star gets totally protected.
My name is Judy Lewis, and I'm the daughter of Loretta Young and Clark Gable. My mother said she adopted me, and of course she didn't adopt me because I was her natural daughter. She wasn't fooling anybody, really. Hollywood knew the true story. I was the only one who didn't. When I was a little girl, I always had a feeling that there was something not quite right about me, because I was born with my father's enormous ears, and they were enormous. They stuck straight out. And my mother had me in bonnets all the time. I couldn't go outside in public without wearing these bonnets, and I hated them. So when I was 7, I had my ears operated on, and I had them pinned back. So I no longer have my father's Dumbo ears. I went to an all-girls high school. I had a friend in class with me. She said, "Judy, how come you look like your mother when you're adopted?" She says, "I'm adopted, and I don't look like my mother." So of course I went home and I said, "Mom, how come I look like you when I'm adopted?" And my mother, without a second's breath, she said, "Oh, well, honey, we live in the same house together, and you have my mannerisms, and it's very natural that you know." And off it went. And I learned about my true parentage a week before I was married. I called the priest who was going to marry us, and I said to him, "I've just heard the most incredible story that Clark Gable is my father, and I'm going to confront my mother." And he said, "Don't. She won't tell you." And I didn't. When I finally confronted my mother, years later, she threw up. She vomited. She said, "Oh, well, you're just a walking mortal sin," which is a little shocking to me at the time, needless to say. My mother asked me to keep her secret from my daughter. So she's asking me to carry a lie and a secret down to the third generation, which I absolutely refuse to do. I've never lied to my daughter about anything. When I can say publicly, I am the daughter of Loretta Young and Clark Gable, I'm whole, I'm present, I'm here, and it's been really wonderful. It's a whole different life for me.
I'm getting away from it, but I want to tell you.
You did talk about how David Ross was pestering you all night. He wanted you to teach him the shag.
Or was it trucking?
Trucking, that's what it was.
He kept asking me to teach him how to truck. That was the dance at the time.
They had to have something new, dance to do up there in Harlem. So someone started trucking. As soon as the news got round, folks downtown came up to Harlem, saw everybody trucking. It didn't take long before the hi-hats were doing it, Park Avenue and it all over town. You see them scuffling, shuffling, trucking along. It spread like a forest blaze, became a craze, and thanks to Harlem now, everybody's trucking.
said when David Ross kept asking you to teach him how to dance, you realized he thought you were there to be his girl.
I don't think I realized it. I don't know whether I was naive or dumb. Really, Frank, I don't think I gave it any thought, because I'm not a suspicious nature. It never entered my mind anybody would do me any harm. Whether it was a setup or a party, I don't think it ever entered my mind. But he was all hands. Like we called it copping a feel, was the word that was used. For any excuse to brush up against you, to put his arm all the way around you, or anywhere where he could touch some part of you, which was very disgusting. Slimy is the only word I could think of to describe the man's looks. I hate to compare him to a Pekingese, but that's about the best. He had bulging eyes, very big bulging eyes that almost dominated his face.
David Ross was never served, and again, I find that hard to believe.
He's one of the luckiest guys in the world. Never served with this, never charged with this. Now, he had to live with it, and I don't know how he lived with it, but at least he didn't go to prison forever, and he didn't have to pay financial damages for doing it.
The only thing I can remember is this David Ross's face. Of course, as I was in my nightmare for many years, I could not get him off my mind and what he had done to me. He took my innocence. You can never get that back.
That you were a virgin.
I don't like to bring it up.
But it's important for the story because you were talking about he took your innocence. He took it on every level. You were a virgin.
Yep. I don't want to talk anymore.
These lovely girls, anything you want.
Don't touch me! No, keep away from me! Let me out of here! No. Don't look at me like that, Mr. Powell. You scare me.
Let go.
Let me away from me! Don't touch me!
The next thing I remember is being in a small hospital, one story. It's just a tiny place, and being given a douche. And the way I remember that is because they use cold water, which is not very pleasant.
When she went to the hospital, she wouldn't have had a doctor cleanse her and then attempt to do an examination, a doctor whose entire business was dependent on MGM, so the fix looked in at the examination.
And of course, at the time, I didn't realize that would erase all evidence, because I didn't know about things like that. I can't remember anything right now.
Do you remember seeing yourself on the front page?
I remember the headlines.
How did you feel about the headlines?
Humiliated. I don't want to talk anymore. Could I stop?
Absolutely.
He heard someone crying and screaming in the bushes, and he went, and they arranged for an ambulance to come.
Clement Soth was the parking attendant who heard Patricia screaming, then saw David Ross run away. On the witness stand, Clement Soth changed his testimony, saying he didn't recognize Ross. I tracked down Clement Soth's daughters. At first, they said they knew nothing. Then 10 minutes later, they called back with the truth.
Daddy testified at a trial doing MGM a favor. And what he was to get in return was a lifetime job at MGM.
He had to perjure himself. So when you do that, that never leaves you. I mean, that's a big deal.
He had only disdain for most of the stars of the time, and certainly for the heads of the studio. I mean, Louis B. Mayer was just no good as far as he was concerned.
But he had a family that he had to support.
Who's to say that any of us wouldn't have done that? I mean, we don't really know what we would have done. It's easy to say from hindsight, but at the time, who knows?
Because one little testimony is not going to touch those big studio people. it wouldn't have changed anything. They would have wiggled out. There are so many women that this has happened to, it affects their whole life forever. And so if we can help one woman, then it would be a good thing to do. And that's why I decided to do this.
So here we are at the Gold Coast Hotel in Las Vegas, and I am supposed to meet Patricia Douglas tonight.
Her apartment's right around the corner.
And that's why she wanted me to stay here. She said, you have to stay at the Gold Coast. So this means a lot to me, and I've waited a long time for this. It's 8:40 now, and she said, do not come over before 9 o'clock. I'm nervous. If this goes well, it begins. If it doesn't go well, it ends. I'm just sitting here waiting because I can't concentrate on anything else. She does not like a man who wears jeans, so you don't see any jeans on me tonight. She also said her favorite look on a gentleman is a vicuna coat, and I had no idea what she was talking about. And then I remembered there was a scene in Sunset Boulevard where Gloria Swanson takes William Holden shopping.
Now we need a top coat. Let me see what you have in camel's hair.
Here's some camel's hair, but I'd like you just to feel this. It's vicuna. Of course, it's a little more expensive. The camel's hair will do.
The salesman sort of leans in with a leer and says,
well, as long as the lady's paying for it, why not take the vicuna?
Sunset Boulevard was made in 1950. So that look is about 50 years old. I think she's actually listed in the phone book. She's listed in the phone book. Just her first initial, P, but she's listed in the phone book. I looked for her for so long, and after all that, but she would have had to have known her last name. I'm rambling. There's so much at stake. There's so much, your first meeting, it's like, hello? She panicked. She couldn't do it. She called me on the hotel phone. I knew it was her because everybody else, nobody knows I'm here. They'd call on my cell. She wouldn't call on my cell because it's a long-distance call, and she won't make a long-distance call.
She can't afford it.
And she was really upset. She felt terrible. She just said, I can't. I'm so sorry. I can't. I just kept saying, it's okay. It's okay. There's no rush. And all I'm thinking is, if you go, this story goes with you. But on the other hand, you're thinking, this poor woman, leave her alone, David, leave her alone.
Let her die with her secret. But
you think about what she was like in 1937, and you think, well, that has to be characterological. That's her personality. That can't have changed.
Maybe this is a test on her part, to see if I'll give up and go away. And when she sees that I won't, maybe next time that'll make a difference.
She still has a chance to find vindication. And as long as she has that chance, then I'll be there.
What will I do now? I don't know. The coldest day of the year, temperature dropped 35 degrees since I landed last night. But I'm here because I finally found David Ross. He had no siblings and no children, and there's nobody left who can even recall him. This guy got away with rape, went back to Chicago, kept his job at MGM. I didn't tell her I was coming, but I know she'll want every detail.
Because it really closes the chapter. Here he is, dead and buried. And there's the proof.
You want me to look at you, baby? Okay. My name is Patricia Douglas. It's very difficult for me to try to remember these things. They have been buried so many years. Believe it or not, 65 years. And to try to, when they're buried so deep, to bring them out. Maybe it'll help young people not to be trusting. I don't know. I hope so.
This This is the part of Las Vegas that you don't see, right in the shadow of the Strip. This is Patricia's apartment, and she sleeps in her bedroom, wakes up at 4 in the afternoon, moves from her bedroom to her couch, sits down on her couch, turns on the television, watches television until 4 in the morning, gets up from the couch, and then goes back into her bedroom, and that's her life.
It isn't that I mind living alone, because I'm a loner, as you no doubt have known from my story now, that I enjoy being alone.
Her favorite show is The Sopranos, which I don't think she realizes she probably relates to because her own experience at MGM and what they did to her was almost like the mafia swinging into action.
James Gandolfini, such a wonderful actor, such a compelling force.
She doesn't leave her apartment, and the only time she'll leave is for a doctor's appointment.
I'm very private. I don't expose myself, I give him a chance to hurt me.
I'll never forget the first time I went into that apartment. I was so nervous.
He was so formal. He was so sweet.
I remember I opened the door, and the back of the couch faced me.
I was so nasty to him.
And I saw this figure with her back to me sitting on the couch.
I was so nasty to him that he invaded my privacy that I thought was so secure.
And she was just sitting there, and I knocked on the door, and she said, "Come in." You know, she had this great, low, gravelly voice.
So I hang up on him, but he persisted, thank God.
And I walked around like this, and I thought, what do I do? What do I do? And I just impulsively, I just sort of threw my arms around her and hugged her, and I said, I'm really glad to meet you. And I think she was taken aback. She went like this a little, but then she settled into it.
He courted me. He sent me flowers.
At first, she was so hard and tough and shellacked, and then I knew it was a veneer, but to get inside of it and to see this person bloom and this so much love inside of her that she was afraid to give.
Bless your heart.
She ate terribly. I mean, her diet, I don't even know how to describe her diet. She basically didn't eat, and she always used to say, how can I be such a fat old broad and never eat?
He's got some bad faults. He's bossy. And he likes his own way. And he's pretty adamant about that, getting that too. But then so am I.
I go to KFC because she says that's the best coleslaw she's ever eaten. She said, you can't get better coleslaw anywhere in the world than at KFC. So I said, well, would you like me to get you some? And she said, oh, would you? And I said, well, you know I would.
I have my way, and I make him think it's his. You know, we women can do those things.
I started to clean toilets, and I said to her, gives you an idea of how I feel about you, that I'm sitting here scrubbing your toilet.
If you'd seen how I fought him, and look what I would have lost.
I guess I love her. I mean, she when you care about someone, you want to do anything you can for them that they want.
You'll never meet anybody like him, ever. I wish we could do his story.
All right, we'll skip me.
No.
Yes, this is you. This is your show.
We're over now with me. What's wrong with Shadow here?
Don't worry. You're not the cameraman. You're the star. Don't you worry.
Well, I mean, it's different.
Don't you worry. She's got you lit.
It's not on me? Why not?
Oh, look. Now she's Marlene Dietrich.
The battle's not over. And until I am vindicated publicly, where everybody knows the true story of what really happened, I won't be. The doors are open now, and the gloves are off. If I have to fight, I'll fight. You have to take me to court on a wheelchair or on a stretcher, I'll go. I was called by the studio.
Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. Oh, what a liar.
And I was told to report to Western Costume Company because I would need a costume for the film they were doing. And that was the words that were used, this film they were doing.
Snap into it, girls. You're 5 minutes late now.
I didn't notice there weren't cameras. I was trusting. I was dumb. I'd never been around bad people, so I didn't know one when I saw one. I've always been fortunate enough that I could trust anybody. But you couldn't trust this man. Slime. Pure slime. He wanted me to teach him to dance. I didn't want any part of him. And we got back to the table, and there was pictures, and one of them had something bubbly in it, and the other one had a terrible odor, and they said that was scotch.
Like to run out of scotch last night.
And that the other one was champagne.
Champagne, and more champagne.
The only way I'd ever seen champagne was in a movie where they pop it and it foams all over. And to see it in a regular picture, it was such a come down mentally for the way I had it pictured. And they said, "You want to taste it?" And I said, no, I don't drink. And that other one that smells so awful, well, that's scotch. Well, how can anybody drink something that smells that bad? Well, it's delicious. Taste it. No, I don't want to taste it. So when I wouldn't drink, they poured some champagne and some scotch into a glass, and one of them held my nose, and the other one poured the liquor all over me and down my throat, and almost the whole glass. So right away I had to go outside to vomit, and I could hardly walk. I don't want to talk anymore. I want to remember this because I want everybody to know what it feels like to be violated. And then in other words, I don't want them to know because it's a horrible feeling.
No. Leave me alone.
And when Ross was, I'm sorry I have to use the word attacking, I cannot use the other word. He'd said that he wanted to destroy me. I don't know why he would want to destroy me. Oh, I'm getting cold chills. Oh, God, I'm cold. He was slapping me in the face to keep me awake because he wanted me to cooperate. And I was fighting him. I was screaming, "I have been attacked. I have been attacked." And then someone, I think it was the man in charge of the parking lot, took hold of me. They brought me home in an ambulance, and I went to sleep, and I didn't wake up until the next afternoon. My eyes swelled up, and besides that, I was extremely sore, ladylike in my extremities is the only way I can think of to say it. And then my family, I don't know why they didn't mention it. The Pictures in the paper were never mentioned. How did I feel? Was I sore? Is there anything I need to make me feel? Nothing. A hug would have been nice, I imagine, but I never got that. It was never mentioned. It never happened. That's the only way I could figure out the way my family handled it was to ignore it. It didn't happen. I did want him punished. I could not get him off my mind. It's because he took my innocence, because I was a virgin, and he left me with horrendous memories of my first time. And believe it or not, it affected the rest of my life physically. I was a frigid woman, and I never changed. It was a packed courtroom. This district attorney said to the jury and the courtroom, "Look at her." And he said it with such disgust. Look at her. Who would want her? And it changed my entire life. And I often wonder if that man, if it ever bothered him that he had done that to another human being, or if he realized what he had done.
And then when you leave the courtroom, reporters push you up against David Ross, who's shown up with Louis B. Mayer's personal attorney to call your charges, quote, absurd and ridiculous.
Oh, it was so horrendous. I believe I just gave up. I didn't like my life and I wanted to get out of it.
And then you have a vague memory of trying to jump out the window.
Oh, I remember seeing a window at the end of the corridor. We were way up high and running towards it. That's all I can remember. I just wanted to get it over with, whatever it took. My own daughter, my grandchildren have no idea. They're going to be astounded to find out that I was in this scandal 65 years ago. But I'd like them to know it, but only under the condition that they knew that I really was a nice person. I wasn't this dirty woman. I wasn't an easy woman.
A rape victim is looked upon as someone who brought it on herself. And that is what makes it so different from other crimes, is the woman feels dirty. She feels cheap, trash.
So I thought, well, if I had a child, I could give my love so freely and it would be reciprocated. There'd be no judging me. They would think I was wonderful no matter who I was or what I looked like or what I did or what I had done. It would be mine.
When I was about 2, I had a ruptured appendix and I was in the hospital a long time. It was very upsetting emotionally, and she didn't like having that kind of emotion. When I got out of the hospital, she sent me to live with my great-grandmother, and I don't remember seeing her for years. She slept all day, and then she ate a big dinner and watched TV and then stayed up all night long. I didn't expect her to iron my clothes or cook a meal or go to my school or talk to my teachers or anything like that. I don't know what she did. I guess she was asleep.
I have a daughter that's, well, let's say we don't get along. She gets along with me for her friend's sake, I think. So that when they say my mother, that she can be able to do it too. But otherwise, there's no closeness there.
I always wondered why she couldn't seem to leave the house, and she never had any friends.
Because I was so alone.
Did your mother ever talk to you about sex?
Oh, no. No.
As far as sex was concerned, that was never explained to me. I never had a mother-daughter talk. I never had that. So I married a man and used the expression as a stud. I had a beautiful daughter out of it. He wasn't worthy, and she's just like him.
She was stifled emotionally and then physically. She stifled herself.
My second husband, I think I knew him no more than 3 weeks, maybe 2. He had never been married, and because of my low self-esteem, he was a challenge.
I only lived with my mother by herself with a husband, a stepfather, once, just for a short amount of time. It was when I was 9.
And then my last husband, he married me when he wasn't divorced and told me he was divorced.
He was kind of scary.
Because they wanted sex, and the only way they could get it was to marry me. So they became bigamists. 2 of them became bigamists just to be able to have sex.
He was mean. He was devious. He'd do things behind her back. He'd take a bath with me. And I was scared not to do what he said. And he wanted me to do things to him. And, you know, and it was our little secret, of course, you know, that old deal. But I had a feeling that I was almost being put out as a sacrifice to keep his interest in her, in being there.
So I never dated again. And I believe that I was about 35. But you can never miss what you've never had.
All I ever wanted, I remember growing up, was to have a real family. I mean, I've been the typical mother, stay-at-home mom, brownies, Girl Scouts, room mother for my 4 kids. This one sucked my thumb all the way to the hospital after she was born. Their stalls are always open, doors are never shut, but I think they're happy horses. I went to visit my mother one time to Las Vegas, and my daughter was with me, and she had mentioned in a telephone conversation, "You don't know me." So very innocently and very calmly over dinner, I said, "So Mom, tell me about yourself. You know, what was your childhood like?" And I mean, you could almost see the hair on her neck go up. She just, you know, started breathing heavy and got all flustered and, "What, are you interrogating me?" And then I said to my daughter later, "Does that give you any idea of, you know, the way I grew up, my childhood?" She says, "That's just bizarre."
Well, she took me to my first gay bar, when I was 19. When I finally told her, she's like, "Oh, God, thank God one of you is." She goes, "But Grandma always knew you were a queen."
I don't want my grandchildren to be embarrassed because they don't know the real story. They don't know anything.
Everything was a secret. We never knew, anything.
So I'd like them to know the whole story.
No, that was what she told me.
Mom, you look gorgeous.
Oh,
Love you too.
You were saying, to this day, you can't watch a movie where there's a rape.
It conjures up memories.
5 decades after Patricia Douglas is raped, the accused is released. Here's a movie about a rape victim who takes her case to court and wins.
The wonderful thing about this movie is that it forces you to see the human ugliness in all of us.
One actress wins an Oscar. The other actress goes public with the fact that she has been raped.
I wouldn't allow the audience to go to this film and say, well, this is just a movie. This doesn't really happen. No, I'm here to say that it does happen, and it really does happen to people all over the world. And I think it affected me greatly, and I think it will continue to affect me the rest of my life.
But I cannot watch any movie where they show an actual person being attacked. And by that mean a physical attack involving sex. I cannot watch to this day. And like I said, it's been 65 years.
So after the grand jury sets David Ross free, you file a federal rape case, apparently the first one ever. Then nothing happens. Why did this landmark case go away?
I have no idea. That is completely vague.
The way it ultimately ended, to me, suggests that something occurred, something that was not right.
No, I went to the lawyer, he told me. I couldn't tell you the name.
William J.F. Brown.
My name is Kelly Brown. My father went into his own practice, criminal law, which he thoroughly enjoyed, and did that till his retirement.
This case was dismissed in state court, was refiled in federal court. It sat for 3 years and was dismissed by the court for lack of prosecution.
He was very flamboyant in the LA lifestyle and always smoked a cigar.
In this instance, there's a document dated February 8, 1940, which references a February 5, 1940 case having been called for the third time, and no one showed.
I would go downtown with him a lot. He'd like to take me to court or something.
Her lawyer did not show in federal court on 3 occasions.
But it was something that kind of turned me off to the law, I think, a little bit, that there was just a lot of deals being made, and I think more so in those days.
The only reason you don't show up at a trial call is if you've settled the case, and you've got a settlement agreement done, let's say, and you don't care that the case is going to get dismissed because it's been resolved. But from what I understand, there was no settlement. And so if there was no settlement and this case was pending in federal court, they punted.
It'd be a little harder to get away with those things in our decades than it was then.
For the lawyer to have dropped the ball and to have allowed the case to be dismissed, I mean, I think that is malpractice.
The lawyer's behavior is deplorable. The lawyer should be arrested.
My understanding is that this lawyer that represented her ultimately ran for the district attorney of LA County.
He ran for district attorney?
And I don't think you win an election in the 1930s for the district attorney of LA County without the support of MGM, biggest employer in LA County.
It almost seems like MGM had a lock on the community.
The movie industry was huge in those days, and you know, they were in bed with a lot of the city officials.
In both the state case and the federal case, the first order of business was the appointment of a guardian ad litem, her mother. So Mildred Mitchell essentially controlled the litigation and made decisions in the litigation.
Not only did her mother have a legal obligation to pursue the claim for her as the guardian, as her mother, but you would think she would also have a moral obligation. This is her kid. This is her daughter. She was raped.
The mother pulled the plug.
And her mother sold her out.
Patricia Douglas took a risk, and she really, especially in that day and age, stepped up to get this out there, to stop it from happening to other people, to vindicate her rights, and to have her mother and her lawyer, and to have it unfold the way it unfolded is a miscarriage of justice.
It's hard to even think of a sort of a David and Goliath story more than this one, except for in the end, David didn't win this. Patricia Douglas didn't win this case in the end. MGM successfully did it. They had the DA, they had the newspaper, they had the one witness who could corroborate. Suddenly, he can't remember what he said at first, and suddenly he's given this great job at MGM forever. They had the doctor, they had the hospital, they had her lawyer. MGM even had her own mother. The fix was in.
Mildred Mitchell used her hush money to buy a liquor store, horses, furs, and a younger husband who abandoned her and took it all with him.
He walked out with everything my grandmother had and left her way in debt.
Except for her 3 brief marriages, Patricia Douglas lived her entire adult life with her mother. She swore she had no idea about Mildred Mitchell's betrayal, but I sensed on some level she'd always known the truth and was punishing both her mother and herself.
I never understood it. It was like a symbiotic love-hate thing. She couldn't leave her mother, but she was mean and angry at her all the time. My mother said one time, I don't know, back 10, 15 years ago, "Oh, you just don't know what's gone on." And I said, "Well, don't you think whatever it was, it's time to let it go?" I said, "My God, you're 75 years old. She's 95, let it go." "Oh, well, you just don't know."
There's no question Mildred Mitchell felt guilty. She went from totally neglecting her daughter to waiting on her hand and foot.
She was always acting like she had to take care of the baby, making special meals. She did everything. And my mother was just nasty to her.
We didn't get real close till she got helpless and I took care of her. Then I felt needed. I'd say the last 10 years of her life is the only time I could say I really love my mother. I haven't told this to anybody.
Do you feel vindicated now?
No.
What will it take to make you feel vindicated?
What will it take to make me feel vindicated? I want it in black and white.
66 years after first seeking justice, Patricia Douglas agreed to come forward once again with her story.
Vanity Fair magazine called me and assigned me to photograph Patricia Douglas for their Hollywood issue. She was a bit overwhelmed. I showed up with 3 photo assistants and somebody to do her hair and makeup, and she avoided direct eye contact. She was definitely in this kind of cave situation, and like when you enter the cave of some kind of caged animal, she was very protective of her space. Patricia sat in the same place on the same couch every day. That was kind of her throne. You see her medications and you see her calendar, which she's filled in with all kinds of notes about talking to David and all these kind of personal items that are kind of her lifeline to the real world.
I read the article. I called her and I said, I am so proud of you. I cannot believe the strength and courage that you have and that you had to do that and to follow through like that. I'm so proud of you. It was just amazing. And I said, I don't know why you ever would not have told me and shared that with me. I said, I'm just really proud of you. And I got nothing but silence. I mean, she wasn't even going to respond to that. And she never did talk about it to me.
I was thinking I'm almost 85, and I really should start thinking about dying.
I called the hospital and I said, I understand my mother is in the hospital. And they said, yes, she's been here for several weeks. And I said, I had no idea. And I said, how is she doing? And they said, she's not doing well. And I said, do you think I should come? She says, yeah, and you better hurry.
How could I help it do good if I expose what they did? And that I changed it in my own little way. That I'm part of that. I'd like to be proud. And now I'm near to tears.
And I talked to her and I said, I'm here, and I don't know if she wouldn't or couldn't talk to me. But she didn't look at me. She didn't say anything. And so I guess I wanted to think she couldn't. So I just told her, go toward the light and go be with your mother.
Patricia Douglas died later that night. She was 86 years old.
It was her wishes to be cremated. We said, don't want her cremated, and it's just, would want to buy this urn or that urn? I said, I don't want to buy an urn. I don't want these ashes. My mother is gone. She is not here. It's like, what do you want to do with this car after you junked it, And I said, just a cardboard box. So you show me a cardboard box for $25, and I said, it's ridiculous. I said, I can go to the grocery store and get a cardboard box. These are ashes we're talking about. And I mean, they just were appalled.
I called the New York Times to let them know she was gone, and they refused to run an obituary. Here's the email they sent me. David, we did not run a Patricia Douglas obituary. Her story is compelling, and you told it. For an obituary, we need something more, a significant legal ruling that grew out of her case, a news peg of some sort. She was a wronged woman who never got her day in court and vanished from the scene until you found her. That story is not an obituary.
Nobody knew who Patricia Douglas was because everyone did everything he or she possibly could to make sure we didn't know who Patricia Douglas was. There's a huge part of me that doesn't see her as a tragic victim, but as a hero. She had guts. She was tough. She was willing to fight. She was a kid, but she was willing to still take on the establishment.
That's my vindication, is the truth. The truth always wins. It comes out no matter what you do, or how many years go by, or how you lie, or be lied against. The truth's gonna out. And I guess that's my vindication.